Hey, good Tuesday morning to you all. This is Mitch. Hope you guys are having a great start to your Tuesday morning and a great work week out there so far. I got you an update weather-wise on what's going to happen specifically for today, but stay tuned towards the second half of the video. We're also going to give you an update on the tropics. We're not going to get super deep into it, but there has been some changes overnight. Not enough changes over a longer period of time to necessarily call a trend, but I mentioned, I think 2 nights ago in a video when we discussed the tropics last, that we were watching Invest 91L. It's about to enter the Windward Islands and then eventually in the next day or two enter the Eastern Caribbean. Model guidance did not like the chances of this developing, but overnight suddenly everything is flipped and almost every single model likes the idea of 91L developing, not necessarily being a big time threat, but we have to watch the trends if it becomes a trend. And anyways, I'll give you an update on what the models are showing, and the ensembles are picking up on it also. We mentioned that, hey, the models weren't picking up on development, but the environment ahead of this looked favorable. So, I mentioned watch out for models latching onto the idea of development suddenly. And they suddenly did do that overnight. So we'll talk about that. If you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Hit me up on Twitter, Facebook. Great way to follow along. Instagram. And things like that. I'm even on TikTok. I'll make videos on TikTok when the weather gets really active. But if you guys got anything that I can pray about, pray over, please put it in the comments below. It gives me an opportunity to pray over it, and it gives others an opportunity to do so too. So let's get rocking here. The Atlantic Basin and U.S. as a whole, there's still that spin. We're still dealing with lingering rain from whatever's left over of Ian, and the low pressure just keeps hugging the coast. So you keep getting basically rain that keeps kind of pivoting into areas of the mid-Atlantic. We'll talk about that when we break down that region. And then we got 91L popping off a little convection. We'll talk about this a little bit more tonight, especially if the models continue to like the idea of development in the Caribbean. So, I know I got a lot of people who view out of Jamaica, places like that. We're watching this system for you guys. But right now, as of right now, if this does develop, it looks like it goes south of you guys. But that is as of Tuesday morning. This will not enter around your area until probably this weekend. So things can change. But this is the little area right here that we're watching. We'll zoom in on this tonight. We'll get a little bit deeper on it tonight. And in this video, in the second half of the video, we'll get a little bit more deeper into model guidance. It dropped to a 30% chance to develop in the next 5 days. I think at the 8 a.m. update, I am almost betting that this might bump back up to a 40% chance to develop, which is what it should have stayed at. I think the National Hurricane Center, and I don't blame them, I would have done the same thing, kind of bit on the fact that the models just were not liking development from this, but suddenly they are. And we're watching this. This might take the name Julia out here. I believe that's the name. I don't want to butcher it. Julia seems like an easy enough name. But Julia, I believe, is the next name storm out here. This might take that name. Then this will take the next name after it, which I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I don't know right off the top of my head. But names don't necessarily matter right now. It's a great labeling thing once we actually have a storm, and especially once we have a storm that's threatening landmass. But I'll have all my names together in tonight's video. But the southeast here, let's break it down region to region. Then stick with me if you want a real update on the tropics. And we'll go over all the model guidance here in a couple minutes. And we'll breeze through this. Southeast, pretty quiet weather today. We'll watch Virginia. Lingering showers are moving to the area. And I think cloud cover will still be just kind of entrenched into the region, keeping you guys locked into the 50s and 60s, even into northeast North Carolina. And then maybe some showers, maybe an isolated downpour or two in areas of the southern peninsula of Florida. Outside of that, pretty chill day. But the northeast and mid-Atlantic, here's what's left over in. Just a low pressure. It drifts towards the coast, drifts away from the coast. But this will pivot showers, maybe even an isolated heavier shower downpour into areas of Long Island, eastern PA, all the way up into the central areas of New York State, the Delmarva area, New Jersey, southern New England. This will just pivot on and off showers today. And if it's not raining, it'll be cloudy and it'll be cool. You'll need a jacket today along this area of the I-95 corridor, along the big cities of Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, New York City, Boston. It'll be a chilly fall-like day with some on and off showers that will certainly be in this area. So how much rainfall could fall between now and tomorrow morning? Well, if you're in and around the Washington, D.C. area, maybe up to an inch. But if you work your way a little bit further east into deeper into Maryland, central areas of Maryland, Delaware, maybe an inch or two of rain. Southeast PA could certainly see an inch or two of rain. New York City, maybe an inch. All the way up to Boston could see a quarter inch to a half inch of rain. Long Island, over an inch of rain certainly possible. And then a pretty sharp cutoff where areas just don't see any rain at all. But we'll finally break loose from this probably sometime late tomorrow into Thursday morning, and you guys will kind of get back to some sunshine, let's hope at least, and some warmer temperatures before another cold front comes through and cools you guys back down. The south central U.S., the only thing we really watch for is some showers in the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma, and then some showers in areas of Nebraska and Kansas that could just kind of drift through the state. Maybe an isolated storm or two in central Nebraska. Other than that, chill day outside of that region. The rest of Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, no rain at all expected. The north central U.S., this is the area where I think some cold air can get into this region probably later this week. So enjoy the warm weather that I'm about to show you that's going to be in place today in this region of the country. But as far as rain, sometime this afternoon and evening, some showers, maybe an isolated storm or two is possible into areas of far eastern South Dakota and then southwestern areas of Minnesota, certainly possible. Some showers in Nebraska, storm in Nebraska or two. Just not anything crazy widespread weather-wise at all in this region. Temperatures, enjoy the warm weather all the way up into the UP of Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, the Dakotas, Iowa, and then we get into areas of Kansas, far southeast Nebraska. We'll get into the 80s, western Missouri, 80s, and then deep into the 80s into Oklahoma and Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas. Nice weather, and then it's warming on back up in the Ohio Valley ahead of a big cold front that will come through later this week. Michigan deep into the 60s and 70s. So enjoy this warm weather if you're a big warm weather fan, because cold air is coming through the later part of this coming week and weekend. But as you can tell, certain areas, even into northeast areas of North Carolina, all the way points north and northeast, locked into the 50s. Certain areas probably won't get out the 40s, especially a little bit further inland and where it's raining. It is going to be a cold day. I mean, it's hard to even call it cool. It'll be downright cold for certain areas for early October standards. So go on and prepare for that. So that's it for the U.S. Let's take a look at the tropics, latest model guidance. Okay, so let's look at the GFS first. And this is the latest model guidance that just came in about an hour ago. Here we go. We'll start this off around Thursday morning. You see this L down here. It's riding really low in the Caribbean. It's already passed through the Eastern Caribbean. It's having a trouble figuring out which vortice it wants to latch onto. I think there'll be multiple vortices, basically multiple pieces of energy that will try to become the main character of whatever potential storm could form. The main dominant piece of energy, if you will. So the GFS likes eventually that one vortice forming, and whichever one forms is important on the track of this storm and how far north potentially any future storm could form. But around this coming Saturday morning, the GFS likes something developing, and then it gets a sub 1,000 millibar low pressure, and then you would argue at this point, is this a tropical storm? And then this moves us right smack in the middle of the Caribbean. And notice there's just a lot of moisture down here in the Caribbean. A cold front comes down to the Gulf of Mexico, almost all the way into areas of the far northwestern Caribbean. And I think this will prevent anything getting into the Gulf of Mexico. But you still got to watch, because we don't know what the pattern is going to be 6 to 8 to 9 days out. So GFS now has a tropical storm around 6 days out from today, and then quickly develops into a hurricane. A very favorable environment down here, and then we're getting into about 8 days out. Has a near major hurricane hitting areas of the Yucatan Peninsula and Central America in general. But you notice it never quite gets north enough to affect Jamaica, Hispaniola, or Cuba. So, but this might be bad news for areas of Central America, as you're getting into that time of the year where cold fronts like to dive deep into this area and really prevents anything from getting into the Gulf of Mexico. You need a weakness, but we still don't know what the pattern's going to be, so you still need to be prepared in the Gulf. The latest European, which doesn't like to suddenly just latch onto things. It's very smooth with its approach. It likes to very slowly latch onto things. But here we go. going through here in time, getting into this weekend. You see that L popping up down here. And then here it is. It finally fully latches onto the idea of something forming. We're getting into Saturday afternoon of this coming weekend. And then suddenly, right before it's about to interact with Central America, it develops into something, but not quite a tropical storm, I would say, sometime this coming Sunday. You look at the Canadian goes crazy with this. You get into late this work week, you get into this coming Friday afternoon. You would argue that the Canadian likes the idea of this already becoming a tropical storm around Friday into Saturday morning, and then a full-fledged hurricane, Category 2 hurricane, heading right into Central America this coming Sunday morning. So you look at the icon. This is the latest 06Z icon. We'll just go all the way out to 120 hours out, and it's doing the same thing, suddenly liking the idea of development. But it's not massive development. It's just 1,005 millibar low pressure heading towards areas of Central America around overnight this coming Saturday into Sunday. So it's just something we need to watch, especially for our folks in Central America. And we need to watch if this trends any further north, because we got to watch the pattern up here in the Gulf and to the eastern U.S. What kind of blocking patterns up here? Is there any weaknesses where if this gets strong enough earlier on that it could creep a little bit further northwest and take this path? It's certainly something we need to watch. But I can tell you the European ensembles have increased in support for development. But I can tell you that most of them have it cruising across the southern areas of the Caribbean and heading right towards Central America. So we need to watch. And I mentioned this a couple nights ago, that I was confused at why the models were not latching on to development in the Caribbean. Because really, you got warm sea surface temperatures, one. You got a huge moisture bubble down here in the Gulf, basically. You got a huge, basically, pocket of moisture for the entire Caribbean down here. If I said Gulf of Mexico, I meant the Caribbean. I apologize for that. But and then there's no shear. Basically the wind pattern aloft supports development for any kind of basically piece of energy that gets into the Caribbean. So you got a nice, basically anticyclonic flow ahead. It allows for an outflow, the storm to ventilate, to breathe, kind of like what Ian did in this region right into here. And then it'll allow for strengthening. So it's something we need to pay attention to, because I can tell you the GFS is a little bit further north than all the other model guidance. And we don't want this thing getting north enough to where suddenly it sneaks into the Gulf of Mexico. So that's all I got, guys. Just pay attention. Certainly if you're in Jamaica, Cayman Islands, but it looks like this might go south. But you need to really pay attention if you're in Central America with this, because these are the kind of systems that sneak up on people. Because I think that'll be something that gets talked about more so today, but if the models continue to latch on to the idea of development, it's really going to become a heavy topic in the weather community. So stay tuned, and we'll keep you covered. God bless all y'all. Have a great Tuesday, and I'll talk to y'all this evening.